there, spooky friends, and welcome to another episode of the Scaryish podcast.
Woo.
Where we where we talk about different things ranging from true crime to lore, ghosts, legends, demons, things like that.
Paranormal.
Things, and even natural disasters, stuff
Indeed.
like that.
Basically anything that's scary-ish.
Yeah, I'm Robin Grace, this is Adam Diaz.
Hello.
And today we have a couple interesting topics, at least I think mine's interesting.
It's a bold statement because I literally have no idea what you're covering this episode. This is one of the first episodes we've done where I have no clue what you've written about.
Pictures. I
saw 2 pictures come in. I'm like, I don't know what these are. I have no idea what she's covering, so it's going to be an exciting adventure for me.
All right. Well, I know we usually cover true crime, ghosts, things like that. And we have covered some disasters in the past, like some dams that have totally decimated neighborhoods, things like that.
Right.
And
countryside.
Yeah. So I'm covering an actual train crash.
Oh shit.
This time. Yeah.
Cool.
So
I'm going to be covering what is known as SUNDS, SUNDS, or Sudden Unexplained Nocturnal Death Syndrome.
When you die in your dreams.
We'll get to it.
Okay.
So before we jump right in, I saw something that came across my Facebook and I was like, you know what? In the vein of like getting back to the things we used to do where we talk a little bit about something that we noticed that has nothing to do with the show because we used to do a lot of tangents. I just want to like focus on one thing that's been going through my mind. So there is a Harley Quinn cartoon. Have you seen the Harley Quinn cartoon? It's voiced by Kaylee Cuoco, the chick from Big Bang.
Okay.
She's Harley Quinn. And it just came out today. And everyone was posting about this. And I had no idea what the fuck they were talking about. That DC executives took out a scene from the show. And it was specific to like the character of Batman and Catwoman. Because at some point in the show, Harley Quinn would have walked in on Batman going down on Catwoman.
I can see why they would take that out.
I can too, but the reason that they gave that's being passed around the internet is they said, quote, heroes don't do that.
What?
And I was just like, oh man, like every executive's wife out there right now is just like, and now you all know why I hate my husband.
Oh my God.
Couldn't believe the reasoning. I looked into it a little bit more and they basically didn't just say heroes don't do that. They said like, we're trying to sell toys for children of heroes. And I think what they really meant was heroes don't engage in sexual activity on camera versus heroes don't go down on their partners. Because I think they asked them at some point, like, are you saying heroes are selfish lovers?
The thing is, in these movies, like The Dark Knight and stuff like that, they do awful, awful things. And I'm sorry, but that's something that is awful, apparently, that you can't, like, you can sell a toy of someone who murders somebody else, but you can't, you know what I mean? Like,
I get wanting to pull it for your, like, the idea of selling toys, but this thing is an R-rated iteration of, you know, the DC universe. So when I saw that, I was like, you know what would have been even better than this headline? If they would have just left it in, you know?
Yeah.
And everyone would have been like, oh, shit, Batman, get it.
That annoys me just because it's like in Injustice, Superman murders someone.
He murders a bunch of people in Injustice.
Yeah, and they still sell toys of them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just, it doesn't make any sense to
me.
We
can't have Batman giving oral pleasure to a female because he can't be showing attention in some way that's sexual. However, he can go beat up everyone that he's ever angry at as long as he doesn't kill them.
Bruce Wayne bangs that one chick in The Dark Knight Rises. What's
Talia
her
al
name?
Ghul?
Yeah.
That's how he gets his son. Yeah.
But it's like, I mean, they're allowed to do that, but
apparently it all has to happen off camera, and we're all supposed to imagine that it's missionary and very selfish and stupid. Cold. And I saw that pop up.
Bad decisions, DC.
Seriously,
bad decisions.
I saw that pop up right before the show. It was going through my Facebook. I'm like, I'm bringing this up because it's fucking stupid, and it also made me laugh at the same time.
What?
So
That's a stupid thing. Whatever.
This has been Comic Book Cunnilingus Corner with Adam. So hope you enjoyed it.
I hope you have that corner every episode.
I better buy that domain before it gets too popular. All right, go ahead and take over. I know you're going first.
All right, I'm going first. This particular incident that I found is pretty fascinating to me. It's really intense, and it happened in the London Underground. that caused a lot of loss of life and a lot of injuries and things like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to travel to February 28th, 1975. You guys remember 1975, right?
Do you really have 1975 data?
No, I don't know. I don't know anything about 1975.
What a tease.
What happened in 1975?
I don't know. Some of the stuff that I'm going to go over happened in 1975.
Shut up.
Yeah.
Okay, well, he'll cover the 1975 stuff.
I won't, though.
Oh, god damn it. Okay, whatever. Well, so we're going to go February 28th, 1975, along the northern city line of the London Underground Public Rapid Transit System. So pretty much like their subway.
Gotcha.
Right? Also known as the Tube, you know? I've never been to the UK, okay? I don't know what things are actually, but I've heard it called that before, for sure. That's definitely, yeah. Anyway.
Anyone in the UK is just like, I hate you so much right now.
So, also my nose is stuffed right now. Can you tell?
I don't know if they can tell.
Okay.
I can tell, because all the editing that I'm going to have to do to get your sniffles out of this.
Okay, so during this time, it's business as usual that morning. Just the hustle and bustle of morning commutes. You got people traveling all up in this shiz. At 8:46 a.m., a train carrying approximately 300 passengers from Dayton Park heads towards Moorgate Station. And this station is the southern terminus of that line. As it is morning rush hour, there's lots of commuters all over waiting to board. The thing is, this train doesn't stop like it should have. And if you folks didn't know, terminus means
the
end of the line.
Yeah.
So it's the end of the line. There is no tunnel further along past this line.
So this is the end of Speed.
Yes. Oh my god, babe. Okay. Anyway, so there's nothing past this point. The train's not stopping. It's heading for a concrete wall. People are noticing that this train is coming full speed to their stop, right? And this leads to an accident that still doesn't really have an answer today, like for why it happened. But it's an awful, awful accident. The train goes right past the designated platform. The conductor, if the conductor noticed any of the red warning lights, there's nothing that could have been done about it, or he did nothing about it. The train went down this tunnel at around 30 to 40 miles per hour. That's fast for this.
It's fast
You
for
know what I
aiming
mean?
at a concrete
Yeah.
wall, especially.
The hydraulic buffer that should have been there to slow down the train was non-functioning. So this train crashes right into the concrete wall at the end. The force behind the crash sent the first carriage into the roof of the tunnel, so it like hits the end and goes up, you know what I mean? A cabin that's usually 3 feet deep, it compressed to 6 inches.
Wow.
That's how much force was behind that. And then the first 3 cars after that kind of crushed in on each other like a horrific accordion. Everything else was just ridiculously compressed by all the forces of this train, like crushing in on each other. The station was left in the darkness of the aftermath, right? All the lights go out, things like that, because this huge crash just broke so much stuff. If any of you have watched Speed, you can imagine it being like the final scenes of Speed.
Except there's no concrete wall. Spoilers, if you haven't seen Speed, you've wasted your life.
Well, the thing with Speed is like they go through that unfinished area, right? And they just like...
They go up the stairway to like Hollywood Boulevard or something. I think that's where they wind up landing. Something like that. It's just so stupid. But this is worse. Whoa. Don't call Speed stupid.
Okay, Speed is not stupid. I love Speed. Okay, anytime it's on TV, we end up watching Speed. But
I defend the remote with my life. No one will change Speed if it's on the television.
But this crash wasn't like Speed. At least at the end of Speed, they go through an opening, right? And they end up on the street. This, not so much. Everything kind of just crashes into each other. Like, you know how car accidents are on the freeway where it's like cars keep hitting each other?
Right.
Imagine that, but with train cars that hit a cement wall.
And there's nowhere for the front car to go. Like if you rear end a car on the freeway, it'll scooch forward. Exactly.
All right, so there's dust, there's smoke, there's debris all up and everything. People are walking around coughing, stumbling, they're disoriented. It's obviously not every day that something like this happens. When rescuers arrive, they begin what would evolve into a 6-day rescue operation, 70 feet underground, that would involve 1,324 firefighters, 240 police officers, 80 paramedics, 16 doctors, and a slew of volunteers that would go down there and help.
It's a lot of people.
So I think all the survivors and things like that, they pulled out within 12 hours, and then they just spent the rest of the time trying to find bodies and things like that in there. They had to deal with having poor lighting, poor oxygen, and the seemingly never-ending dust in the air. Not to mention there was an unbearable heat that could reach up to 120 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow.
That's about 49 degrees Celsius. For those that do Celsius, that's oppressively hot. We have a high of 113 out here in Vegas for the next couple days, which means it's actually probably going to be 116, something like that.
I was going to say, you told me on the way home today that the temperature was 116.
Oh, yeah. It was 116 on my way home today from work.
Brutal, man.
I left work at like 4:30, so that's nuts. Okay?
I feel like the door to the oven got opened early out here in Vegas. We are recording at 2:08 a.m.
It's still 90 degrees outside.
90 degrees outside.
Yeah,
right now.
It's still 90 degrees outside. It's nuts. It is not pleasant in the slightest. So imagine working in that heat for days in a closed space with limited air.
No visibility.
I was reading because of the way the underground subway system works. It's like it needs suction type thing to create like an air passage, and because of the accident or the crash, it didn't have that nice closed air way for air to travel, which is why oxygen was really hard to get down there. I'm obviously not explaining it correctly. I don't deal with those systems, but obviously it wasn't working. Okay, so they couldn't get the right amount of air that you normally would get down there. The dust probably didn't help. I definitely admire those people that worked in those conditions, especially in an effort to save people in that wreckage. Those that worked down in the station later compared it to being in a war zone. So you have all this debris, all this wreckage, and then all these bodies that are just everywhere. Then you have the obvious survivors that are calling out for help the entire time as well. So it
sounds like a nightmare scenario.
Right. The accident had a total of 43 deaths and 74 injured.
It's a lot of people that survived. Holy shit.
Carrying 300 passengers, that's a lot of, let's see, 74 injured, 43. So that's like 250 people survived. That's a pretty good amount considering how awful that accident was. It's considered to be one of the worst peacetime accidents in the history of the London Underground. Before this accident, the transportation system had served around 3 million people a day with a really limited number of accidents. It was actually considered to be one of the safest forms of transportation before this. So it's nuts that this happened. So I'm not sure what disasters we've covered, but we've definitely covered a few of these like technological disaster type things. Despite having a safe system, safety isn't always inherently guaranteed, right? No matter how hard you work to make a system fail safe or free of errors, there's always going to be that human error aspect of anything. Authorities were trying to figure out what could have caused the crash, obviously. Any witnesses reported that it looked like there were no attempts to stop the train. Some even say that the train accelerated into the end of the tunnel. Mechanically, they couldn't find anything wrong with the train. It was reported that the conductor looked as if he was standing still, staring ahead in like a zombie-like state. He supposedly didn't even brace for impact or have any reaction at all to his impending doom. The conductor was Leslie Newson. He was 56. He'd been working with the London Transport since 1969, so he was 6 years. And he was on this particular line for 3 months. Looking into his life and activities, they weren't able to actually find anything that would shed light on what happened that day or give exact answers or anything like that. He was a good employee, and according to his coworkers, he was an overall good person in general. He was reliable, he was careful with his work. He wasn't one that was said to take risks. He just did his job, did everything he was supposed to do, right? He was law-abiding, he was a family man, and he supposedly loved his job. Those working with him that morning reported nothing out of the ordinary. He was completely normal as far as they could tell, and he'd actually already completed a few train routes without incident by that point. So, turns out he did have some cash on him because he had plans to buy a used car for his daughter after his shift. So he already had plans for after work, right? Apparently it was something he'd been looking forward to. He'd been talking about it with his coworkers, super excited about buying his daughter a car. What they found in his possession on the train was a rule book for drivers and 2 notebooks filled with notes on what to do in the event of a train malfunction or an emergency.
Wow.
Both were neatly bound in plastic protective covers. So he took his job seriously. It looked like he was prepared for if anything happened, things like that. All these really didn't seem like signs of someone who had plans of committing suicide or hurting himself or others. That being said, you never know. And we've talked about it multiple times on this show before. Like, you could be the happiest person in the world, but not really. You know what I mean?
And you just never know when something is going to change, and no one knows what could have changed while he was on board the train.
There was no evidence of his being influenced into some type of terrorist attack either. Despite research into the possibilities of why something like this could happen, there weren't really any answers to be found. An autopsy found no medical reasons for why Newson would do this. There was no heart attack, no stroke, no aneurysm, no medical issues to blame for his actions that could be tested for and checked anyway. There wasn't any medication that could be to blame for it either. There was nothing that could be blamed for some lapse in consciousness or judgment. The only thing that they could find was a small amount of alcohol in his system. This, however, was debated because was he drinking it or was it part of the decomposition process? Because apparently when you're decomposing in that level of heat after that accident, it creates alcohol, I guess, or something. And then there's also a medical condition that exists that turns your body turns sugars into alcohol when you eat carbs. So that's a thing too. I don't know if you can test for that though. I'm not sure.
I was going to say, if he didn't know he had that, it'd be probably impossible to identify after the fact.
Right. No one witnessed him taking any drinks or anything that morning though. So it's like no one witnessed him drinking. He wasn't a big drinker. He didn't do drugs or anything like that. So it was really weird for them to find that on his system or in his system. X-rays showed that he didn't even raise his hands to protect his face or anything when, impact happened. So it makes me wonder what it was that could have done that to him, where he's just like, this is gonna happen. You know, he didn't move, he didn't do anything to protect himself.
It's one thing to accept your fate. It's another thing to like not even have the human reaction of throwing your arms up to shield yourself when you're about to collide with the wall. Right. You know.
Other medical ideas or theories were a type of undetected neurological disorder that would put him into a type of fugue state. It could have been some sort of temporary disruption in his brain that caused confusion or loss of concentration. I keep seeing global amnesia brought up, and it's something that is undetectable in an autopsy.
So would they be able to tell if he had like a stroke or a seizure even?
Yeah.
They would have been able to tell?
Yeah. They said it wasn't a stroke, heart attack, or any of that stuff.
Huh.
But he'd been doing this job for years. He didn't have any incidents. There was one source that I saw that apparently weeks before he'd blown a stop or two on his routes. So I don't know. But
this was the one stop to not blow.
Right. Some have posed that he may have been poisoned with some undetectable substance in his blood. Then there's the simple idea that he was just daydreaming when it happened. I will admit to the periodic daydreaming. Like, just today, I was on my way to school and started spacing out. Like, when you drive, it's kind of muscle memory type thing where you just drive to where you're going to go.
It's like your mind and your eyes are paying attention, but your brain kind of wanders a little bit in the thinking process.
Because you're driving, right? Your eyes are paying attention to your driving, but you're thinking about other things. I'm sure a lot of people that drive on a daily basis have experienced this. So you drive to XYZ place every day. It becomes a habit. Then school just started for me. And that's a new thing to add to my schedule. I've been driving to work every day. So reflexively, I started to drive to work this morning. I told you about this, right?
Yes.
I don't know how many of you folks have done this in the past, but I was thinking about a bunch of stuff. So I was thinking about what I had to do for my art business and upcoming events and all this stuff. And before I knew it, I was halfway to work already, which is really far from school. So I had to make the biggest circle to retrace my route and then head back to school.
It doesn't help the beginning of your route is identical going to school as it is going to work. And when it deviates, you would have been driving for long enough where you're already in La La Land.
Yeah. So,
which is, scary.
I ended up 30 minutes late for class because of daydreaming. And if this happened to Newson, I would believe that to be some answer to an extent. Because that being said, with the warning lights, those red warning lights that show up that tell you, like, the end is coming up, dude, you'd imagine he'd wake up from this daydream from seeing these lights and change in the environment. It was noted that the entire time, Newson never let go of the dead man's switch that's on the train. So it's something that if the conductor or whatever lets go,
it stops the train.
Stops the train.
It's like what you have on a treadmill, or if it like pulls off for whatever reason, like because you fall off the treadmill.
It's like that thing in Speed where if they let go of the trigger, the thing explodes.
It all comes back to Speed.
It all comes back to Speed. This trigger, they tested it. It had no defects whatsoever. So he held it the entire time. So he was aware enough to hold this thing steady. So it's really strange, this whole thing. By the end of their investigation, it couldn't be determined whether what happened was deliberate or not. It's still unclear because he's not there to defend himself or say anything.
Did his family have anything to say? Was his wife like, oh, I was going to leave
everyone
him?
Was like, no, he was a nice person. He cared about his job. He was law abiding. He never did anything out of the ordinary. And no one expected him to do this on purpose at all. Considering he had plans to, do this stuff for his kids and things like that. So it's just really strange. Because of this accident, though, the London Underground actually had to rethink their safety system. Apparently, they implemented a system informally known as the Moorgate protection. And it causes trains to automatically brake if the driver becomes incapacitated in any way, or if the train unexpectedly picks up speed. There are even adjusted speed limits for trains as well. At Moorgate's Platform 9, I think that's the platform that this accident happened at, they installed 3 timed train stops along the way. If the train passes any of these at over 12.5 miles per hour, the emergency brake is applied.
I was going to say, that makes the most sense to me, is like having a speed regulation where if you're over it, the train automatically starts to stop.
With no technical explanations or medical explanations for anything, this is a strange occurrence that probably won't ever have a definitive answer. The Department of the Environment, which is a strange name for a department, concluded that it was the fault of Newson, which is really sad. So they blamed the conductor for it. There are 2 memorials erected around the station, which is nice. I think they were erected in like 2013 and 2014.
That's a long time to wait. That's almost 40 years.
Yeah.
And I imagine at the time they're like, we don't want to remind everyone as they go to the subway that they could die getting on the subway.
I think it's because the family and all the families and things like that kept bringing it up.
Right.
And so it's like, you need to do something. You know what I mean? So those exist now. And that it's still a functioning station. So I mean, if you guys want to check it out, I guess you can. But that's one of the pictures that I sent you is the end of the station.
Gotcha.
But yeah, so that is the Moorgate tube crash.
Wow.
Yeah, of 1975. I enjoy riding trains, but I do find them terrifying because even if it's just a subway train, right? You're in this car going ridiculously fast in a tube underground. And when you're above ground, it's like you're on this thing that's just these metal wheels on rails. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's just crazy. I don't know.
I mean, if you look at it that way, all forms of public transportation can be very terrifying because more than anything, you're just not in charge. You're not in control.
Right.
Someone else is flying the plane or conducting the train or driving the taxi or the bus or whatever it is.
Like the bullet train, when we rode the bullet train, that thing like goes to almost 200 miles per hour or
it was
something.
very fast.
It's so fast. Imagine just one thing, like someone throwing a nut under there or something and throwing the entire train off.
With
know?
like the bullet train and just air travel in general, when I get on those things, I'm just like, this is more convenient than any other way I could travel. However, if something goes wrong, I'll probably die.
Yeah.
And that's just sort of the thing that you kind of have to push out of your brain when you engage in public transportation sometimes. Regardless, when it comes to subway travel, I don't know. That's one of those things in that specific case where I think most of those people did not expect to be making that sort of concession when they got on the train that day. Like, I could probably die if something went wrong. I think in most cases, people think like, oh, I might get hurt or I might get slowed down if something goes wrong. Like, usually, like, subways break down and the cars stop and then you're just stuck there in the tube.
Yeah.
But in this particular case,
I don't ever want to be stuck in an actual tunnel. That would
or it's just dark everywhere.
Yeah.
I would probably fall asleep.
Almost
certainly. Which is
hopefully we could all have conductors like the one from Train to Busan.
Wow. That movie is horrific too.
Yeah.
So, all right, good stuff, Robin. A little bit short, but that's okay. Solid stuff.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
You know what else was short?
What's that?
That cabin after it got crushed.
Wow, that's messed up.
It's messed up. I just think it's really crazy how a force like that can crush so much metal into such a small size. I think one of the things that I was reading was the first 15 rows of seats got crushed into 2 feet.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how much these cars got crushed.
I imagine most of the survivors came from the back of the train.
End, yeah.
And then anyone who was just on the platform when it happened. I don't know how far away the platform was from the actual wall of concrete that was collided with, but I'm sure there were some people that got hurt standing there too. But...
Oh yeah, especially when you have metal shrapnel things flying everywhere.
Right.
Yeah. So the idea is terrifying. It's giving me anxiety just thinking about it.
It's also the idea of going down there for recovery and being in the dark, in the dust, at 120 degrees, trying to recover people. It made me claustrophobic just hearing about it. Yeah. So enjoy that nightmare fuel, y'all.
Yeah, I get claustrophobic for real though.
All right, so before I move on to my topic, we are going to take a quick commercial break. And we are back. So this week, someone brought up a topic in Discord that I had kind of forgotten about and was really happy to see it brought up. It's really awesome having such an active community that we get to engage with, and just being able to interact with you folks in general is just always a good time. It always triggers recovered memories as well, which is awesome. And it's kind of crazy to think about the fact that we've been doing Scaryish for so long that there's things that I've forgotten about that could be recovered memories. Because I feel like we almost just started doing the show, but also I'm very aware of how many topics we've covered.
Yes, we've definitely covered a lot. It's funny because there are only so many creatures that you can make full episodes out of. So hopefully you guys are okay that we do a little bit more true crime, a little bit more medical marvels.
Going back and forth is definitely something I think everyone has come to grips with. But I think we keep it interesting though, you know? I was very
keep you on your toes.
I really wanted to cover some true crime stuff that wasn't scary. It was just crime, and people in our Patreon were just like, no, we're not interested. It was a 2 to 3 vote. It was a 2 out of 3 vote of, we don't want to hear about heists, fuck off.
Oh,
so
no.
I might do 1 or 2 and try and find anything with a supernatural, or if there's enough murder in the heist, I'm sure I could include it, but in most cases, nah. I just think it's awesome when especially there's stuff where it's stuff got stolen in mass amounts and no one got hurt and no one knows what happened. That shit just blows my mind.
Yeah.
Like that documentary about all those paintings that got stolen in Boston that my mom was watching the other day.
Yeah.
Don't know the name of it. Absolutely fascinated by it. Totally need to watch it. Anyways.
It's the biggest heist in history or something.
One of them, for sure. I want to give a shout out to Dawn on Discord. So thank you for bringing this up. It's always nice to see folks saying, hey, I remember you said this a few episodes ago or 100 episodes ago. Because in most cases, we don't remember a lot of the stuff we say. I could probably quote the first 70 episodes of Adventure Zone to you, word for word. I don't remember what I said 2 episodes ago on our own show.
The thing is, during live streams, someone will make a comment that we don't see till way later on. And they make a comment, I'm like, I don't know what that comment's about. I don't even know what I said 5 minutes ago. I don't know what I
said 5 minutes ago. So it's totally true.
Yeah.
So I was very pleased to see this come back up because it was something I did want to add to our topic document. and just completely forgot. That said, what I am covering this week, just FYI, is kind of scary. So shout out to my cousin Chrissy, who asked me way back on episode 50 to cover spontaneous human combustion, because this is a little bit similar to that. Spontaneous human combustion is one of her biggest fears. She don't really know what it is, or what you can do to prevent it. So in that same vein, I present to you, dear listener, sudden unexplained nocturnal death syndrome, otherwise known as SUNDS, S-U-N-D-S. So before I go any further into this topic, I already know what you're thinking. Adam, do I really need yet another medical condition to be terrified of? I know a lot of folks out there are nervous Nellies. I won't call you hypochondriacs. I'm a nervous Nelly too. If anything happens to me, I'm like, I have a disease. I have some sort of skin fungus. I have an STD. Those are the three things that always go through my brain. And I look at Rob and I'm like, what did you give me? And then it turns out it was just like a potato chip on my chest and I'm stupid.
Or Cheeto.
But the answer to the question of do I really need yet another medical condition to be terrified of is yes. The answer is yes. So stick with me because that's what you're here for. So
go ahead and watch some House too if you want other things to be afraid of.
Oh man, fuck yeah! I always tell Robin like, oh, my foot just twitched like for 5 minutes. If I go under and I'm out for a few days, please make sure the diagnostician who looks like House knows my foot twitched for 5 minutes.
We always quote House where it's like, it's never lupus.
It's never
not
lupus.
Don't worry about it.
This is also not lupus. It's pretty crazy. So while there isn't a ton known about this syndrome, in comparison to other disorders or syndromes or diseases, what is known about it is that it is very rare. So overall, if this does freak you out, just keep in mind that this does not happen to a lot of people very frequently at all. So now that you know how rare this whole thing is, let's go ahead and talk about it. So sudden unexplained nocturnal death syndrome, and I will just call it SUNS from now on, is what it sounds like. Seemingly normal, healthy people dying suddenly in their sleep with apparently no cause or no warning. Now, I do say seemingly because there are a few things that are believed to contribute to this or increase your risk, but no one quite knows what really makes it trigger. SUNS, by the way, is also referred to as sudden arrhythmic death syndrome or sudden adult death syndrome,
is this
also known as SADS.
Is this related to SIDS?
It's studied in the same way SIDS is studied, where it's like we're not sure why this happens or what causes this to happen or what we can do to prevent it. But in America and in China, it's more commonly referred to as SUNS.
Okay. Because
one of the things you're about to find out is not only is this not as rare as I thought it was, it's pretty well known throughout the world, even though I had no fucking clue it existed until I found an article about it, which I'll get to. So some of you may have actually heard of this before. I've actually mentioned this topic before, like I've said.
That's why I thought you had already covered it.
Right. An isolated incident, you always think I've already covered every topic that we go over, and I'm like, no, I haven't, trust me. An isolated case in the 80s was studied pretty closely when this happened, and it got enough attention that it was written about in the LA Times. Now, I haven't found the exact article in the LA Times recently. I found it like 5 years ago, did not bookmark it. That's the first reason why I did not cover this. I did find a different article in the LA Times from about 8 years later in 1988, where they referenced this once new cases were showing up. So there was a family who had left Cambodia back in the 70s during the genocide that happened over there. If you don't know about the Cambodian genocide or the killing fields or anything about that, and you're interested in history or just the awful atrocities that mankind perpetrates against itself, I would look that up. About 1.5 million people were murdered over the course of like 5 or 6 years. So to escape that horrible thing that was happening, families that didn't align politically with the people in charge or were not the proper class just noped the fuck out. They had to. One such family wound up escaping to the United States. That family had a son who was in his late teens who was having trouble sleeping. When his parents noticed his appearance deteriorating very rapidly, they asked him what was wrong. And he told them that he was afraid to go to sleep.
Oh, no.
Because he was having nightmares that were terrifying. And he was afraid that, I got goosebumps, he was afraid, that hasn't happened to me in so many episodes, he was afraid that if he slept, this entity that was chasing him, which he could not identify, but he was so afraid of, he was refusing to sleep and doing everything to stay awake. He was afraid that it would catch him and it would kill him in his dream and that he would actually die. he had become convinced of that so much, he refused to sleep. And after some convincing, his parents did what parents do when their kids are scared of going to sleep. You tell them it's okay, they're going to be fine, nightmares cannot hurt you. They calmed him down, and he did go to sleep. And for a little while, they thought things were okay until that night. They heard screaming in the dead of night. They shot out of bed and ran to his room, and by the time they got there, the screaming had stopped because he was dead. He died during his nightmare.
That's terrifying.
That is what sudden unexplained nocturnal death syndrome is.
That's some Freddy Krueger shit right there.
This teenager's...
That's like literally...
Yeah, teenager's death and 2 others that happened within weeks of each other. Those other 2 did not know him. It wasn't like they were connected or anything like that. They also died during horrific nightmares within weeks. That was the premise of the LA Times article that I cannot find that I believe came out in 1981. Now, while on a flight in 1981 or 1982, a man was reading this article and he was severely affected by it, and that man was Wes Craven, who is the man who created Nightmare on Elm Street. And he stated in an interview when they were going over the creation of Nightmare on Elm Street, when he was talking about this article, quote, "Here was a youngster having a vision of a horror that everyone older was denying existed. That became the central line of Nightmare on Elm Street, where you are being treated like you're crazy, even though you know you're not crazy." And in this case, they were able to convince this kid, you're not crazy, you just need to sleep. We understand that you're scared, but there's nothing to be afraid of. And then he died. And yes, this means that my childhood boogeyman and the horror icon known as Freddy Krueger was born from individuals dying from suns. That actually happened. So it could say based on a true story at the beginning of that movie with like the standards we go based off a true story shit nowadays. So let's dive into suns itself a little bit as a disease so we don't have to think about Freddy Krueger anymore.
Yeah, because that's just horrific. And it makes me really afraid to ever have another nightmare.
So it was noticed.
Nightmare.
It was noticed as a disease. I hate you so much. It was noticed as a disease quite a bit at the end of the 70s. It's credited as having been discovered in the Philippines in like 1712. Or I'm sorry, 1912.
Okay.
As something they started noticing was happening. So they started noticing it more and more, and worldwide during the end of the 70s and the early 80s, especially when it came to refugees from Southeast Asia in the United States and in Canada. And it's kind of horrific to think of what these folks were running from and had escaped from, and that they took this awfulness and this fear with them. And when these refugees started to experience sudden death in their sleep, it was very obvious to the people who had taken them in and the people who were taking care of them and going and making sure that they had the things they needed as refugees, that this was a problem that needed to be addressed, and they had no idea what they were dealing with. So they took a bunch of different variables into account, and they tried to make a connection between the folks that were suffering this bizarre type of death. Various types of things like heart disease in their family, heart disease present for them, connective tissue disorders that could be part of it, basic nutrition, toxicology. Maybe there was something about the environment they came from or moved to that was affecting them. Their metabolism in general, any hereditary factors from their family history, anything to connect these victims to see if there was something that was the cause in these specific people. And more importantly, if there's some epidemiology they need to be tracing, can they pass it to someone else? Have they imported something people need to be afraid of? Some of the folks did suffer from a condition called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. This is where your heart becomes thickened without any obvious cause.
Okay.
They're not exactly sure what happens here. It doesn't mean it's a death sentence. It doesn't mean a bunch of bad stuff's going to happen. It's an abnormality. It doesn't mean that you're going to suffer from SUNS. It doesn't guarantee that this is the sort of thing that's going to happen. It's just a potential link between some of the victims that they noticed often enough where they basically mark this down as maybe this is in some way, shape, or form a symptom or the cause of it. It's not something found in all victims, but there was enough where it was a potential link. So there's also something called Brugada syndrome. That is a genetic disorder where the electrical activity in your heart is abnormal. It increases the risk of arrhythmia and sudden cardiac death.
Wow.
Which is something that people I think my grandfather, in fact, has a pacemaker.
Really?
Because he has arrhythmias, and a pacemaker is a device you can put into your chest that will regulate your heartbeat to make sure your heart doesn't skip a beat and that if any sort of irregular heartbeat is not kept in check, you could suffer a sudden cardiac arrest.
Wow.
It's pretty dangerous.
Oh, also, don't overdo it on caffeine, because overdoing it on caffeine can give you an arrhythmia.
Which I have had before, which sucks. So the craziest thing about Brugada syndrome is that the arrhythmias and your risk of death increase when you're at rest. So it's not like when you're having physical activity and your heart's beating more and more. With this particular syndrome, it's when you're resting.
Wow.
So, side note, at this point in writing my script, I was 100% convinced that I have this. I was going through the WebMD thing of like, you look up too many symptoms and like you match them up and you're like, I've had an arrhythmia before when I lay down. So I was like, I totally fucking have this.
Do you?
When it comes, I don't think so, but I don't know. I need to go get checked. When it comes to Brugada syndrome, there is no cure. But you can get an ICD, which is very similar to a pacemaker, which can correct your heart rhythm abnormalities and basically prevent things that are bad from happening. So this disorder, much like SUNS, is observed more frequently in those of Asian descent. And it's more common, by far, in men than women. So that is something that they noticed when it came to Brugada syndrome that also carries over into SUNS as they started to study it more and more. And there have been a lot of studies done on SUNS, which is why it's so shocking to me that I've never fucking heard of it before.
Yeah, I've never heard of it before either.
So there was another instance where this popped up in a specific group of people in the same time period, but it was not with refugees carrying with them the terror and the fear of a genocidal regime that they just got away from. It was a group of Thai workers who were living in Singapore for work. I'm not exactly sure how big the group was, but in that specific group of Thai workers working in a different country, 230 of them died from SUNS between 1982 and 1990. That's an 8-year period. That means of that specific group of workers, one died in their sleep with unexplained causes every 13 days.
Wow.
Less than every 2 weeks.
It really makes you wonder what it is.
And what the fuck is happening? So 13 days. Actually, I did the math on this. I just did 365 times 8. Then I included 2 for the leap days. So you know my math is sound. I divided that by 230 because that's how many people died. And it's 12.7. So it's less than 13 days. Like, it really felt like that horror show we were talking about, that horror anime that we watched, where it's like, you don't know who it's going to be. You just know that there's another one coming. And in that show, it's supposed to be one a month. And that was terrifying enough. So this is such a bizarre disorder because there seems to be outbreaks that are happening at specific times with specific groups, and everyone is just like, we don't know why this is happening. There are statistics on how frequent this happens to people, and they're skewed if you look at them within a certain time frame because it happens significantly more to a small sample of people across a shorter time frame, which is super scary because it's like, if this kicks up, who knows if it's just going to keep happening to people. It's also important to note, since these are the two things I've referenced so far, it does not always happen to people who are placed in a different spot than their home. It's not something that's necessarily related to homesickness or stress or anything like that. It also happened in Hawaii before it officially became a state. It happened in Hawaii in 1948. In a single year, 81 men of Filipino descent died of SUNS in Oahu County. In one county, 81 people in 1 year. So this shit is crazy. And I'm pretty sure I'm dying in my sleep tonight for looking into this too deeply.
I was going to say, what if it's something like once you find out and you
start talking about it too much, who knows what's going to happen?
You could be next.
Some of the studies...
That's horrifying.
This is one thing that kind of freaked me out. Some of the studies I was trying to get into on these websites I normally go to had an extra level of security where I had to log in. And I don't have any fucking credentials for these places. So I couldn't read them. I found like 7 different studies, but a couple of them that had more in-depth stuff regarding specific cases I couldn't find shit on. Let me rephrase that. I couldn't access the information on, which was super frustrating, and that normally does not happen. It has happened when I've studied things about like the Catholic Church or possessions or anything regarding UFOs. I always run into those walls. So this one having it was a little bit odd. But let's talk about some stuff that will make at least some of you feel better about this if this is scaring you or it's kind of freaking you out. So Brugada syndrome averages between 1 and 30 people for each sample of 10,000 people taken. Okay. So 10,000 is a pretty common sample. That's actually the sample that we use at work for daily active users.
Oh, okay.
So if we're rating like contact rates or CSAT or stuff like that, it's not per person, it's per 10,000 people because cell phone games have a lot of people playing them at once.
All right. I was getting confused because I was like, wait, you guys do medical tests on people?
No. You always take the wrong details of certain things. But yeah, 10,000 is the sample that they're using for this. So Sun's cases specifically, outside of these bizarre cases when measured as a whole, are measured in samples of 100,000. So 10 times more to show you how less frequently this happens. I had mentioned it is more frequently seen in Asians, and the breakdown that I found from one of the spikes, so one of the samples where it's happening more frequently in 1981 and 1982, was from these refugees, okay? Mm-hmm. And Laotian Hmongs had the highest rate with 92 cases per 100,000 people. So it's still very rare. Other Laotian groups who weren't Hmongs had a rate of 82 per 100,000, and Cambodians had a rate of 59 per 100,000.
That's really not a lot.
It's not a lot, but when it happens all of a sudden, you're like, what the fuck is happening, and why are these people dying, and there's no known cause? One is too many, you know? I also reviewed numbers from 7 other studies I found, okay? I found 7 different studies. I went through them. I found a really awesome site that compared all of them to each other because they were really trying to figure out what the hell was going on. So there's a lot of numbers. I'm not going to give you all of them. One study ranges from 1948 to 1982 in Singapore, so it's significantly long. Another study was done more recently from 2001 to 2013. That was in China. That was the largest study conducted, the largest sample. So the others are only like a single year or maybe 2 years. So let me take some of the fear out of this with some of these statistics by letting you know something that'll make you feel better. So of the 1,002 deaths that occurred combined with 6 of these studies, only 32 of them were women. The other 970 were men.
Wow.
That's how much more common it is in men. That means 70% of you listening right now, according to the demographic information we've been given, are like, phew, bummer, sucks to be you. The 7th study conducted in China had 1,854 deaths that occurred across 13 years. That had a ratio of 13.8 men dead to every 1 female casualty.
Wow.
So that is significantly different in numbers, but still 14 to 1 is pretty good odds if you're a female. So again, an exact cause was not identified for these deaths. In fact, one of the notes on the studies that I noticed, which was really fucking creepy, was that the only commonalities were found after the folks passed away. They weren't able to establish any way of predicting who was at higher risk or who might die next, basically.
Oh, God.
They're only able to find things after they died where they're like, I guess like this particular condition between these 2 people who passed away, but how many people didn't pass away with this exact condition, so they're not exactly sure how to match these sorts of things up.
Do they ever record the conditions in which they went to sleep? Because there's not an urban legend, it's the
fan death thing?
Yeah.
Yeah,
where if you have a closed room, completely closed room, and you have a fan on in there, you'll die.
It's there. That's not part of it. They haven't recorded exact conditions, but they did record things that happened either before or during their sudden death. We're going to get to it, okay?
Okay.
So men are much more at risk. The average age for someone dying from SUNS is between 33 and 37, which means 35 and 36 is right in the middle, which is making this more scary for me. If you are not of Asian descent, if you've been listening to this, you're like, I'm not Asian, I don't have shit to worry about. The risk is much less. It's 50 per 100,000 instead of like 90 or 70, but it's not that much less, you know?
Okay.
It's still very rare, but it doesn't mean that you're free and clear because you're not Asian. It just happens, if it's happening almost twice as much in someone that's Asian, that's significant. That doesn't mean that other people are immune to it.
Okay.
The main thing, which is why it's so fucking weird to me that like we haven't heard of it. The only thing they think is connected to this that makes you for certain a higher risk is testosterone. Because that's the main thing that separates like male from female when it comes to genetics and body chemistry, is that males typically produce more testosterone and females produce more estrogen.
What if it's just like a succubus out there that's like more into men, you know?
I think there'd be different things that would be like associated with the death. I don't think it would be a succubus like for sure. I think it would be more of like a dream demon, which is what Freddy Krueger is. So there are a lot of theories over what could cause this to happen. And I have seen so many studies on my screen tonight that as I was going through and counting them of like potential hypotheses, I counted 18. And they range from genetic mutations, from like 3 different genes possible, to potassium deficiency, like eat more bananas, you won't die from Freddy Krueger killing you in your sleep, to literally one that just said night terrors.
That'll do it, the bananas.
The one that said night terrors, it included it because so many of the victims who are adults, who typically don't suffer night terrors, who hadn't suffered night terrors in their past, experienced symptoms of night terrors.
If I fucking have a bad dream tonight, I swear to God, I'm going to be so upset.
They experienced the symptoms of night terrors directly before their death. Not like they started having a bunch of night terrors, like they started thrashing and screaming, and then they died. So the worst part of what I found, I'm getting goosebumps again, the worst part of what I found in this whole research pile is that in some cases of adult night terrors, not necessarily ones specific to this, but just adult night terrors in general, is that the individual experiencing an adult night terror are, quote, unarousable. And no, not like they can't get a boner.
Okay.
Like you can't wake them up.
Oh.
You're not able to wake them from their horrific nightmare. And by the way, I know I said in different episodes that if like you wake a sleepwalker, it won't cause anyone to go crazy, and that's a myth because I used to sleepwalk. And I'm not sure if I'm spreading a new wives' tale or if this is actually based in fact, but I'm pretty sure you shouldn't be trying to arouse someone in the middle of a night terror regardless. Like, no one wants a hand job when they're being fucking hunted down by Freddy Krueger. So it's kind
What
of...
if Freddy Krueger just looks at them and is like, whoa, buddy.
Whoa, I'll come back tomorrow. Have a good night. Anyways, it's kind of crazy that it's so common for folks in Asian descent, and I've never heard of it as someone who's half Puerto Rican, half white. It's not even that much more common, especially since I've never heard of suns or sads before. In Asian culture, this has a lot of names. It happens in Japan as well. It's not attached to refugees or anything like that. It's just folks in Japan have this happen to them as well. And it's known by a different name there. It's Pokuri disease. I'm not sure if I said that right. That's how it's said on Google Translate, so I apologize if it's wrong. In Thailand, it has a different name. It's known as Lei Tai, and that translates to sleep and die. In the Philippines, they call it something that's very difficult to pronounce because it's in Tagalog. I'm not even going to try and pronounce it because it sounds nothing like it's spelled in English. So I don't want to upset anyone because it just sounds completely different, and I cannot make that noise with my mouth. But it's spelled Bangungut, and I really wish it wouldn't have been so late tonight, so I could have reached out to one of our friends who speaks Tagalog and been like, yo, how do I say this? But it translates to rise and moan in sleep. It's also a word that is used very frequently for nightmares, but as I was reading through, they have a different word for nightmare as well. This one sounds like the word for night terror, or something more than a nightmare. Korean has a different word. It's spelled Dolyeonsa, which again is spoken completely differently on every translator I found. That one just means sudden death. So all these different cultures have a specific word for this syndrome that's happening. There's also a word in Arabic for it, according to Wikipedia, which is not the most trustworthy of sources. And if I can't find 2 or 3 things to back up something I see on Wikipedia, I typically don't include it. When I took the word that Wikipedia said represented this disease or this syndrome and put it into Google Translator from Arabic to English, it translated to garlic. And I was like,
garlic.
Don't know if that's right, so I'm not going to say that one for sure, but I thought you folks would think that was funny.
I love garlic in my life.
So let's do a recap on this. It can happen to anyone, but it is more common in Asians, and it is way more common in men than women. The age range on victims during all of these studies is between 15 and 63. So if you're under 15, one, you shouldn't be listening to the show. It's rated mature. Go get a parent right now. Get parental permission.
No.
If you're above 63, congratulations. This probably won't happen to you, and you're almost eligible for that Social Security, which is pretty sweet. Shout out to my mom. She got her insurance card. Woo! Medicare! But the most common is mid-30s. The average age that is most common for this to happen is mid-30s.
You better watch out, babe.
I mean, you're going to be there soon, so...
No!
And it seems to come in waves. It doesn't seem to be something that's like steady and sustained. It seems to have like, all of a sudden over the course of these 2 years or these 8 years in this different population in this different part of the world, people just start dropping dead in their sleep, which is terrifying. So many scientists went into the studies assuming it was going to have some form of poisoning or toxicology common to all these folks that were dying, or the environments they had been to or are going to in some way, shape, or form. And in all 7 studies I read, they were skunked on it. They found no evidence of toxicology or poisoning at all. Aside from the symptoms you have while sleeping immediately prior to your death, which are similar to night terrors, there was only one symptom that was discovered, and it was discovered in the largest study, the one done in China for 13 years, that takes place directly before you go to sleep. Quote, feeling cold before retiring.
But I'm always cold.
So basically, if you're cold before you go to bed, that was one thing that folks had stated the night they died, enough where it was marked down as something that was a warning sign. So if you're getting ready to go to bed and you say, oh man, I feel a bit cold, you should probably warm up before retiring. So this puts me at an even higher risk because I love to be cold when I sleep. I love to be cold, period. I'd keep the house at 55 degrees if it wouldn't cause me to live alone and be ruined financially because of how expensive that would be in Las Vegas when it's 115 degrees outside.
There's like 4 fans running right now, though. I'm just like, holy fuck.
Almost all those are from my mom. She decided that she's going to circulate cold air from the cold rooms to the hallway, and then it'll hopefully funnel to the hot rooms. It has not worked so far. So one thing I thought of is like, you know how they tell you, like I already mentioned, that if you wake up a sleepwalker while they're sleepwalking, they'll go crazy. Again, that's not true as a sleepwalker who's been woken up while they were walking. The other thing I used to hear as a kid, which I don't hear as often anymore, but I swear I heard it all the time as a kid, as someone who was born in 85, and I used to hear it from adults, was if you die in your sleep, you'll die in real life. Like, I'm pretty sure we've heard that in emails we've been sent before.
I have heard that. Like, I don't know if that stems from Nightmare on Elm Street, that people spread that, like, if you die in your dreams, you die in real life. But I've heard that so many times in my lifetime.
100% always assumed it came from Nightmare on Elm Street, but it would not shock me if these cases that were happening in the 80s were happening more frequently back then, and it became fuel for thought for people who knew, like, someone died in their sleep while having a nightmare.
Have you ever died in your sleep?
Yeah, that was the next thing I was going to say. I have died one time in my dreams. I was shot in the head. I felt something hit me in the head, and I knew in that moment I'm dead. And I fell down. I could no longer move, but I could still see. And I watched this like shootout take place in front of me in my vision. And then eventually I woke up. So it's pretty obvious that that's not 100% true. You can die in your dream and not die in real life. Because I didn't die.
I've never died in my dreams. I've had dreams where I've kind of flown out of cars and into like the water off of cliffs. But I always end up like swimming out, you know.
You're somehow okay.
I'm somehow okay. But I've never actually died in my dream.
In my script, I wrote, like, it's pretty obvious that doesn't work because I died in my dream, but I didn't die in real life. Or did I?
Well, I mean, you never... What if this is hell for you?
I wouldn't be shocked. So, not really. Just kidding. I just cannot help but feel like there is a lot of instances where people sincerely feel like it's possible to die in your dreams because of the fear. And maybe it is possible that some of these folks died from fear, because yes, you can die from fear. Your body's physical and chemical reaction to being overwhelmed with fear can literally poison your system, and it can be fatal. It's super rare, but it does happen. And although I had a lot of details about folks being examined after death, there was nothing in any of these reports I found that would compare the similarities between dying from fear and dying from suns. So for this one, it's not like I have to speculate at the end whether or not this thing is real. It's not like Mythbusters where I'm like, oh, maybe this is plausible. Like, this has happened. This is real. It's 100% real. I just have to wonder if there's some sort of boogeyman associated with this that we just haven't been made aware of, because whenever he shows up, or he, she, it shows up, people die. He has a 100% success rate. Some of the folks in other cultures, and this is kind of creepy, associate suns with old hag syndrome.
Really?
Which is sleep paralysis, which is scary. But I suppose that makes sense too. Because if there's things that happen where someone started screaming in the middle of the night and they died in their dream, and then you have a dream where you're frozen and you can't move, that's terrifying. Not to mention the fact that people hallucinate all the time when they're in sleep paralysis, and the most common thing they see is the old hag. So kind of connecting those two things to be like, that's a fucking dream demon right there that everyone sees when they're in sleep paralysis. Yeah. She must have got him in his dream.
It's just
kind of makes sense.
It's just, at least for me, where how that one person was screaming, before they died. I've had, I don't know if it was sleep paralysis or what, but where you're laying there and
what if that's an ambulance going by in the background because someone just died in their sleep?
Shut up.
How fucking creepy would that be right now?
That's not funny. But like I have had instances where I've tried to scream and I don't know if I'm in my dream or whatnot, but I can feel like I am trying to scream, but no sound ever comes out. Honestly, since I've moved away from Hawaii, I haven't had horror, like terror dreams, nightmares. I don't know what it is about having lived there. I swear I had night terrors so often. And now that I've moved away from there, I don't know if it's just like that the bad vibes there or something like that, but I don't experience those anymore. And now that you've brought this up, I'm kind of terrified that tonight I'm going to have one.
I'm super nervous I'm going to have a nightmare tonight. And I will say almost all my nightmares take place in the childhood home I grew up in. Almost every single one of them. Most of them take place in the basement. We posted that we went to go see the Allegiant Stadium this weekend, but there was a kid there, a random kid there that was dressed as Chucky. Oh, it's because the coach for the fucking Raiders' nickname is Chucky.
No, is it really?
And I told you that in the time, and you're like, oh, okay. Because he's like a ginge, and he always looks angry, and they nicknamed him Chucky.
I was going to say, like, his name doesn't even sound like Chucky. I don't understand.
You don't change you don't get a nickname because it, like, rhymes or anything like that. He looks like him, and he's always angry, so they're like, he looks like that murderous doll.
Okay.
So the kid that, like, was redheaded showed up dressed as Chucky with, like, a football coach's, headgear on.
Okay, I was so confused. I was like, There's a kid that looks like Chucky over there, and he literally is dressed exactly like Chucky.
This is why you need to like register the things I'm saying to you rather than like just thinking, oh, he's an idiot. So it's kind of weird too, because when it comes down to this whole thing with this topic, as it comes down to some of the topics we've covered, no one fucking knows what dreams are whatsoever. We have a very good idea of what your brain is doing when you're dreaming.
It's just your subconscious, right?
You're filing away information, and as you're filing away information, your brain is...
How is that filing away information?
That's what I don't fucking know. I'm not a scientist. Go yell at someone else.
I'm just like...
Your brain is supposed to be filing away the information that you've gathered throughout the day. Maybe your brain doesn't give you dreams the right way, and that's why you can never fucking remember anything, because you don't file. Because you're like, how's that filing away information? But it files away the information... And the way I think it works is like as each thing that happened throughout your day is like being put into chronological order, like a reflection of that is put into your head movie. And that's why it's like, oh man, like I thought about this one thing at one point in the day and then it popped up in my dream. Or like the last thing I saw on TV before I went to sleep wound up in my dream.
So you're saying your subconscious is like collecting metadata?
Yeah. It's just like, what can I play for him while I heal this body?
If my head could file away a bunch of reinforced concrete information, that'd be great.
Yeah, it's like if you could actually just start remembering the things I want to remember and not just random worthless facts, that would be nice. But I will say that I used to be pretty good at lucid dreaming when I first moved out to Las Vegas, like about 10 years ago. And to this day, something I was able to start doing in my dreams when I would realize I was dreaming and staying in the dream was telekinesis. I could move things, mainly move things to my hand. Like if I held up my hand, I could move the cup to my hand. Like Bruce Almighty, when he moves the fucking sugar to his hand, he's like, oh. I can do that in my dreams to this day. Even if I don't realize I'm dreaming, there's something about the dream where I try it and it always works.
Huh, okay.
So I feel kind of good about that. I just really hope I don't have any nightmares tonight, because the telekinetic
really
power never,
now.
ever fucking helps me in nightmares. But I do have my method of getting out of a nightmare.
They always turn the lights off and the lights don't turn back on?
Lights never turn on in my dreams when there's a nightmare happening. There's always something I can feel but not see. And then there's sometimes stuff that's actually chasing me. But if I clench my eyes shut super, 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 super tight, my eyes actually clench in real life. And then when I open my eyes, I just look at the darkness of the ceiling and I'm like, okay, cool.
Oh no.
I made it out.
I will not open my eyes in the dark, man. I fucking refuse. I cannot. The fear of opening them and seeing something you don't want to see, I will not open my eyes. If I wake up in the middle of the night, I'm like, no. Just close your eyes, put the blanket over your head, roll over, and just like, sometimes if I'm really scared, I'll roll over so that my back is to the wall so that I don't have to see if anything's standing on the edge of the bed, and I just face your back, and I'm just like, just fall asleep. Don't look anywhere. And yeah, I mean,
This topic is 100% the most worried I've been and the most sure I am that I will have a nightmare directly afterwards.
God damn it.
Since the Exorcist one. Since the Exorcist diary thing, the true story behind the Exorcist. That one was fucking terrifying. So, yeah. That, my spooky friends, is sudden, unexpected, nocturnal death syndrome, otherwise known as SUNS, or the inspiration for
The Nightmare on Elm Street.
So, hope you enjoyed that, and whatever horrific, sick way you can enjoy a topic, that fucking creepy, because that one really fucked me up.
I hope you guys don't have nightmares, because God knows I'm gonna have them. Fuck me. Ugh.
So yeah, I think that's just about everything we have for this episode of Scaryish. If you have a story you would like to submit to us, we'd be more than happy to hear it and read it on the show on Storytimes. You can email storytime@scaryish.com. That is our email address, or go to our website, scaryish.com, click on Contact Us, fill out that form. It comes directly to us. Or you can hit us up on our social medias. Facebook is facebook.com/scarishpodcast. Twitter is @scarishpod, and Instagram is @scarishpodcast. Robin, for folks who would like to donate to us, how can they do so?
You can go to patreon.com/scaryish-podcast. Those are monthly donations. Tiers start at $1 due. At $1, you get ad-free episodes. Can't really go wrong there.
Ad-free is the way to be.
Wow. As you go up, there's a bunch of different tiers. You can check them out. If you're not into the whole monthly subscription thing, you can also go to coffee, ko-fi.com/scaryish-podcast. Those are one-time donations. And all your donations that you do, regardless of which outlet you do them at, help us keep the show going. And it helps us pay for website hosting fees, podcast hosting fees, and just upgrading studio setup and making sure we can bring better quality stuff to you.
One day, we're going to have enough donations where when I go to LA Times or New York Times or Chicago Trib or any of these sources that I'm always trying to check on.
You'll just pay for an article?
No. If you look at more than like 5 articles in a certain amount of time, they don't let you look at anymore.
Oh.
And they just pop up this thing that's like, do you want to sign up for like $4.99 a month? And I'm like, fuck you. No. One day if we have enough patrons, I can actually be like, I'm taking $5 out of PayPal and I'm going to pay for this stupid thing so that I don't have to try and constantly go to the source code to steal information that should be readily available. So either way, we sincerely appreciate everything that's donated to us because that becomes more likely
really
of a thing.
Genius.
Yeah, no shit. Thanks. They figured it out though. It doesn't fucking matter. No one cares, but it's like they have their articles stored in a different spot and they capture like a flash of it onto the website. And the only thing you see is the code for the thing that captures the flash instead of seeing the actual article now.
If you folks
makes it a lot more
have
difficult.
never accidentally clicked around on your keyboard, if you press F12, it brings up the code for your webpage that you're looking at.
Indeed. But yeah, if you have a story, send it our way. If you want to donate to us, that's how you can do so. We appreciate all the support that we get. Hope you don't have nightmares tonight. But if you do, hey, email us and tell us about it. We'd love to hear it. Hopefully you survive it. So this is the end of the episode. So Robin, go ahead and sign us out.
Keep on creeping on, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Hopefully.
Oh my God.
Bye.